Hey, how's it going guys? Zuko here, and welcome to the Preorder Roundup, where we're going to be talking about the newest anime figures that you may or may not want to add to your collection. Now, March was a pretty interesting month. We had a nice spread of figures as always, but not without some controversies this time, which should make things a little bit more interesting at the very least, but we'll get to those when those specific figures pop up. But before we get started, I gotta mention something else because I always do in these intros. I made a mistake this time. I forgot to check on my camera, and it filled up. So what that means is that partway through this video, the camera's just gonna stop. I apologize for that, but I'm hoping you can still enjoy the video regardless. I'll probably put something in the corner there. Maybe it'll be like a representation of how I'm feeling about the figures, but I haven't really decided yet. But either way, hope you enjoy, and let's just get started. Alright, so this time I'm trying to be a bit more organized. I've grouped the figures by company, so even though some only have like 1 or 2 figures, this should help the video be a bit smoother of an experience for you guys. But anyway, first up is Good Smile Company with their Mihono Bourbon, the Chestnut Cyborg. I like to call her the Gundam Horse, as the pose feels very inspired by the series. I like it though, credit for being fairly unique within the Uma Musume line of figures, even though I don't think the outfit deviates enough to really feel like a mecha horse girl. One thing we never saw until now are the rings that are around her tail, which are kind of neat. And like last time, I still enjoy all the futuristic components that are found throughout her design. But the defining feature of this figure remains the perspective of the catapult deck, along with the pink energy rings that give this figure a real sense of depth. It kind of just makes this figure more enjoyable to look at. It's a neat concept for a figure, and Good Smile Company seems to be handling all the elements of this figure with care. Elaina Early Summer Sky version. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of upset that this one ended up costing 27,000 yen. I feel like that's a lot, and my urge to impulse buy kinda died with that realization, but this is still a really cute figure. The half and half witch outfit and casual clothes work surprisingly well. In fact, I think I like her design more here than I do on like any other figure of her. But that kinda goes back to the whole like anime characters in casual clothes or streetwear. She frankly just looks lovely in this outfit, and I'm really drawn into all the blues throughout this piece, especially on her top. I feel like the shading on this outfit is excellent, and even like the sheen of the clothing, it just looks really good to me. Dynamic this figure isn't, but it still feels fairly substantial due to the fact that there's just all these items and articles found throughout it, like the witch robe that's hanging off of her arm, or the broom that's in her hand, and even the big suitcase that's just resting on the ground. It doesn't really need to be there, but it certainly adds to the piece's composition, and it just helps place you in the world of the journey of Elaina, which I think is always a strong factor into making a figure feel a bit more special. And on top of all of that, you still get this really cute blushing expression, and because she hasn't taken off like all of the elements of the witch outfit, she's still wearing her hat and the boots, which I just really like those elements of her design, so I think it's kind of hard not to like this figure. So Max Factory only had one scale figure this month, the Racing Miku 2021 private version. And I know I was disappointed in Elena's price tag, but this Miku costs about 30,000 yen, which is kind of approaching Furyu levels in terms of like Miku price tags. Now, let me be the first to say that this figure looks quite good. Her face is top notch, the gradients in her hair have this like high quality soft look to them, and the dress is really cute with like excellent billowing and the appropriate like creases and folds to go along with it. But I think they're gonna have a really hard time selling this one just due to the simplicity of the piece for how much they're asking for. I've seen some people say this looks close to a prize figure, and I couldn't disagree more. I feel like that's a ridiculous statement to make. You're just not gonna get nice hair sculpting like this on a prize figure, especially from the back. I love the way her hair is just kind of like curling at the tips. I think it looks super good. And then there's the paint finishes like the pearlescence found on her ribbon. Like, I might have said this figure is simple, but that's mostly in terms of the composition. The individual components are like expertly handled, and I expect this figure to look really nice when it's done, so maybe I should just stop complaining about the price here. Also, before I move on, I like how they etched in the Good Smile Racing logo into the suitcase, though you're only going to see this feature from the back of the figure. And I mean, the back of the figure looks nice, but from the front where you're normally going to look at this piece, you're not getting that detail at all. You're only getting the sticker, from Good Smile Racing, which is a splash of red, but I feel like that's a bit more simplistic and not necessarily as impressive. Not that, an etched-in engraving or logo really is super impressive or anything. I just think it would make this, white rectangle stand out a bit more. But yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you guys think about this one. I'm definitely curious if you share my same sentiments or if you disagree. S-Fire put up both the Emilia and Rem with their childhood version figures this month. We talked about Rem last time, and really the same things I said there apply here. I love the concept, very cute figures, and the price of 22,000 yen is pretty good when you break it down, but the whole ReZero fatigue and somewhat simple sculpts and paint jobs leave these figures in an awkward, kind of unpopular state. I'm kind of just judging that from like the MFC numbers though, so I could be wrong. Emilia remains my favorite of this specific trio of figures. This is just too happy of a figure for me to at least not appreciate, and I think their outfits lend to just like a better looking figure overall. But even Ram I ended up liking more than Rem simply because I like the pink and red colors more here. It's pretty much as simple as that, but overall I guess I'm not like that surprised that these figures aren't really grabbing people's attentions like I assumed they would at first. It's a bit of a shame, but hopefully, I guess if people like them and they don't want to spend the money, maybe they'll drop in price. It's not great for the company, but it's great for your wallet. The real standout from S-Fire though, and one of my favorite figures of the month actually, was their All Might figure. This piece is excellent, with my only complaint being the size. He's a 1/8 scale, which feels like a bit of a disservice to this guy, and his crouch down pose is only going to make him look even smaller when you place him on your shelves. If you can get over that and don't mind the 26,000 yen price tag, then goddamn does this figure look good. The effect pieces here are just rad. The pink shock waves, the yellow lightning in his fist, even the smoke clouds are just awesome. This is such a good base for All Might, the concrete underneath being smashed to bits under his feet, with all these heavily shaded clouds swirling around him. The figure just feels powerful. The definition of the muscles and the shading applied to his suit only add to that fact, and his expression is pretty much perfect too. If you're a fan of All Might, I feel like this is the figure to get of him. Here we have Sabito and Makomo from Demon Slayer by Phat Company, two figures that are kind of alright, both cost about 20,000 yen, but I'm not really feeling either of these figures. Makomo is cute, I guess, there's nothing really wrong with her figure, but they both feel really basic for the price tag. Even though it's not too high, they still feel like they're not really doing enough for 20,000 yen. When I look at Sabito, nothing regarding his outfit stands out at all. It barely looks like he's swinging his sword either. And the best part of this figure is the dirt being pushed around his feet. I think that looks kind of good, but that's not really enough to recommend a figure. Especially when Demon Slayer figures constantly hit the bargain bin, and Phat Company has been heavily delaying all their figures. So it's kind of hard to really get behind these and recommend them, but I hope they turn out good. A surprise release came from Phat Company this month with the reveal of a Makima figure. Now, this one costs 28,800 yen, which is the same price as E-Streams. However, this is a standard release, so you can find this one cheaper. Now, what do I think of it? Well, it's not bad, it really isn't, but I do find some elements of this figure strange. For one, this pose just feels a bit out of character. It's not overly cutesy or playful or anything, but I would never think of this pose for her if I was imagining an upcoming figure of Makima. I do think her face is better than most Makimas so far, but it still feels a bit off. And I'm not really loving the desaturated color of her hair when compared to other Makima figures, but I could see this trying to be more anime accurate compared to manga illustrations, so I suppose that's fine. It's just not really my favorite. Despite not really liking the pose for her, I do like how her trench coat was sculpted here to kind of simulate the flowing from the wind. And while I don't really like the graffiti on this figure, it feels like it's out of place a little bit. I will say the crumbling brick wall actually looks fairly realistic, and I like that a lot. Makima fans oddly have it kind of rough right now. Despite how there is a ton of figures on the market, there's always an issue here and there with these figures that just kind of stop us or make us hesitate on really picking out a favorite. If you ask me, I think the E-Stream version is still the definitive version of this character. Personally, I find that figure to be the most faithful representation of the character. It just feels like it understands who Makima is, which I think is a bit like underrated in terms of what makes a figure really stand out, what makes a figure kind of special. So if I had to recommend any of those, it would still be the E-Stream version, but I don't think this figure is bad. I just feel like it's a little bit off from what I would personally like. Plum's Vanilla and Chocola are actually re-releases with slight changes. The colors and patterns on their underwear are different, and they seemingly changed their hair to end in translucency, which isn't really too noticeable on Vanilla, but on Chocola, I think it looks kind of terrible. They simply went way too far with it, making her hair look literally clear or even white, which is such an odd choice that I don't understand why like no one would tell them to relax a little bit on these translucent pieces. If you don't mind that, then I think these figures are cute, but I'd honestly just recommend hunting down the original figures if possible, as I think they're a lot better. Shana's new figure from Kadokawa is up for pre-order. Now, let me ask you something. Do you like playmats? Because you can get one with this figure for 9,000 extra yen. Is that too much money? Probably, but that's just my opinion. I don't actually collect playmats, so I don't know their specific retail price. It just seems kind of excessive. Otherwise, you can get this figure for about 25,000 yen, which is fairly reasonable for what they're showing, if I liked it a bit more. I really wish I liked this figure more. This Shana design is just gorgeous. I absolutely love her look here, but I just can't get over how phoned in her base and the flame effects are. I think some people might call me out on this, but they give me the impression of a Figuarts Zero figure and the effects that go along with it, except I kinda like those effect pieces more than the flame effects on this premium scale figure, which I think is a problem. Now, where this figure shines the most, at least for me, is her face and her hair. I'm not exactly sure which breed of flower this is, but I find the hair accessory to be absolutely lovely. And her hair is such a vibrant shade of red, and the way it's done up, it's kind of obscuring her left eye, but only a little bit. I just really like it. I don't know what else to say. Now, some of these photos kinda make me worry though, because I can't actually tell if this figure has decent shading. You can kinda tell as you go through the gallery that the lighting on this figure is absolutely influencing the way like some of her hair is shining. Very obvious between these two photos, like that is not just some like nice sheen finish. It's just like the way the light is bouncing off of this figure. So I can't actually tell how nice the shading is on this piece. You can tell in the back of her hair, it starts to turn a little bit like yellowish orange and then goes back to a deeper red, which I do think looks pretty good, but that's an element that's found on the back of the figure. Nowhere really can it be seen on the front of the figure, which is a bit disappointing, but overall, I can't help but feel like there's a bit of flatness to this figure that is kind of being obscured by the fact that they're just really lighting this figure in a very flattering way. I don't think Kadokawa is doing this figure justice, but I love the look of Shana here enough where I wouldn't blame you for wanting it or even buying it. Nero costing roughly the same price as Shana is kind of surprising, as comparatively, I think they nailed this one for the most part. That is to say that there's nothing problematic on this figure. Her face is lovely, the silky red fabric behind her looks like some of their best sculpt and paint work ever from one of their figures, and I'm not exaggerating on that. I think it looks that good. And for a white dress, I feel like they've done a really good job at adding details that stand out, like the definition of her body and whatnot, without having to go overboard on any dark shadows. I've definitely warmed up to the secondary, like, see-through layer of her dress as well, because the elegant nature of the outfit would have been sort of compromised if it wasn't there, and being able to see her entire leg up to her hip is still pretty attractive. Also, you get a second smiling faceplate, which is really cute, and I feel like it's very fitting for this figure, but there's actually a third faceplate you can get from very specific stores. I'm not sure exactly which those are, but I'll put an image of the faceplate on the screen right now, and I guess you can decide if it's worth like jumping through the hoops to get it. Now that I'm looking at this specific photo, I do feel like her hair shading is fairly flat. I'm not even sure if there's like any shading on her hair at all whatsoever, but it does kind of in a way go along with like the pristine look of the dress, so it doesn't actually bother me. And I think I'm also just a sucker for the design of her eyes, just like All of these Nero figures always have really nice looking eyes to me, so I guess I'll give it a pass. It could definitely be a little bit better in that regard though, but I think it's one of Kadokawa's better figures that I've seen over the past few months. ZB26 Nook of Ephemeral Dreams version finally went up for pre-order. This took a very long time for that to happen, but you know what? Relatively good price tag at 23,000 yen for her. Now, swimsuit figures really shouldn't be that expensive to begin with, but I think she comes with plenty of stuff to completely justify that, and maybe even be a good deal at that. Figures kind of got it all going on for it, like the strap adjustment goes kind of crazy, and hell, even the definition on the bottom half is like superbly done. I love the draping of her hair over her arms, and the colors too, super eye-catching. Kind of a shame that we don't get any palm trees with this figure like we saw at the last One Fest, but I do like the accessories here. Also, I'm now realizing, I don't know how I only now realized it, that she is extremely perky. Also, look at the tummy. Like, this figure is pretty ridiculous. Also, I love the rich purple used for her nails. Very lovely color. But yeah, stuff like the little octopus fella is really well painted for his size. The clear bag to her side looks convincing enough to kind of be real. And I really like how the ice bucket is actually like shoved into the sand just to make the figure feel more like it's actually on the beach. Killer design, killer body, great price, highlight of the month for sure. UKM 2000 Soda Tail. Oh, how I wanted this figure. I really did. But Pony Canyon can't price their figures for shit. An exclusive 30,000 yen swimsuit figure is just not gonna happen. Even though I find, as they put it, her healthily toned physique to be legitimately attractive, and the pink hair, the bubblegum, the eyes, and the hat are all perfect in terms of color. Like, I really like looking at this figure. I'm just not convinced on the price. Perhaps if the fishnets were actual material instead of just being painted on, or the MP3 player didn't look like a McDonald's toy, you might convince me, but I just think it's a matter of the company asking way more than they should. I know I'm ignoring her gun case, and for what it's worth, the little stickers and colors match along with UKM 2000 well, but unless it opened up or something, it just doesn't do enough to make the price tag better in my head. I was sold on this character. There's just something about this attractive anime girl blowing bubblegum bubbles with these sparkly eyes and a slightly unreadable, at least for me, expression. It just instantly had me won, so it's a bit of a shame because they really had me ready to just like horny buy essentially on a character I don't know, but the wallet is definitely smarter than the brain this time. Alright, let's finally talk about one of the few figures that had some controversy around it, the A to Z A by Wing. I mean, I already noticed this the last time this figure was shown off, but now that it's here, it's pretty apparent that this character's skin complexion has been completely changed from the original artwork. I'll pull up that art right now for you guys to take a look, but when you compare this to the figure, it's not really hard to notice that she just kind of became completely white. And I ultimately find this figure to have suffered as a result. Now the interesting thing is, the artist Neko is apparently fine with this. In fact, I'd say they were probably the one who made the changes themselves. There's plenty of tweets of them promoting this figure, and if we check out their header, if I just kind of go to their page really quick, you can see the updated artwork. It's not the exact same artwork, obviously, but it's clearly the same character with the more updated look. So to blame Wing on this would be incorrect, as it seems like this was just how Neko wanted the figure to look, but man, I just don't really agree with it. I'm not going to pretend like I know this character's origin or background, but even from an artistic standpoint, the darker skin with lighter hair is just like a tried and true combo. It's like a beautiful, natural contrast that we've seen time and time again. And because she has orange eyes, I feel like that would have elevated the figure further, because that would have gone great with that natural contrast. Now, compared to all the other A to Z girls, this figure is probably, or most definitely, the most ambitious. It's also the most expensive by a wide margin, costing around like 38,000 yen. So between the change of character design and the price tag, Wing might not be able to sell a ton of these. I will absolutely give Wing credit on their sculpt, however, as everything from like her flowing gray hair to her jacket that's almost like frozen in time as it's falling off of her a bit, and of course that humongous spear all look fantastic. Even the rock that the spear is stabbed into has an impressive amount of detail, and the smaller things such as her fingers and feet just show a level of like delicate craftsmanship That's really commendable. It's also just a really good pose, essentially hugging the spear and riding it in a way that just gives this figure an even more fantastical look compared to her A to Z sisters. I simply wish this figure looked more like the original art, but what do you guys think on this one? Is the complaining valid, or is the figure fine as is? As for freeing this month, they did have a handful of figures, but truthfully, there's not that much to discuss about them, so I'm gonna kind of just like rapid fire these really quickly. For example, we had a couple of cuckoos get bunny girl figures for Erika as well as Sachi, and they look good, but there's really not that much to discuss about them. Likewise, we also got bare leg bunny girls for Mei as well as Haruna from To Love Ru Darkness. Now, you don't really need to discuss these because they're bare leg versions, and you can kind of, go look up how the original releases turned out to see if you might potentially want these figures. A little more interesting for the month was Natume as well as Aoi from Monochrome Bunny. Now, these are cast-offable bunny girl figures, which is not something that's new to freeing, but they don't often do it, so it's kind of a little bit of a spectacle each time they do. I think these girls look rather good. They're very voluptuous, which I think is appealing in and of itself, and I think the art style for both of them is rather nice. If I had to pick one, I would definitely go with Natsume. I just feel like her expression is a bit more my kind of thing. So I think they're nice. They cost 39,600 yen, which is about the standard, but considering these are cast-offs, that's actually not a bad deal at all. Well, at least relative to like freeing prices these days. But yeah, not bad, pretty good. And then wrapping up the freeing section were two Azur Lane girls. Neither are bunnies, but they're still B-style 1/4 scales and are both very familiar if you've watched the One Fest videos where they both appeared. This one is the La Galissonniere Black Cat of All Hallows Eve, which is a rather nice figure. I like this one a lot. Might be my favorite of the month from them. Just a good design, really, and I gotta say, I love the boldness of the pink, and because she's got long twin tails, it's definitely like a solid chunk of the figure to appreciate. I also just like the overall darker color palette of everything else. It's mostly black and then a little bit of red on the heels. Fishnets look really nice on this figure, especially on the arms, and I like the kitty paw pad on her gloves. It's very cute. The one thing, though, that I noticed this time around, which I don't think we could have noticed last time, nice butt, is the fact that she has a really long cat tail, and it's reminding me of the Taiga figure where I didn't really like the tail from freeing. However, it's one solid color, and it's a bit furrier in its texturing, so it just feels like they're trying a bit more with this tail, so it could turn out fine. Might not be a reason to like worry about it, but I don't know, it's a bit too chunky for me. I wish it was like a cuter, thinner tail, but I don't know. The other figure was the Chapayev White Cavalier's Respite version, which is one where I went on like a little bit of a goofy rant because she's eating donuts on her rug, which is just really stupid looking. Just get the dish, just get a plate. But there's also like lotion being spilled out of the bottle in her right hand there, which I didn't notice last time at all. I don't feel like that really adds that much to the figure either. However, as much as I can complain about like how silly it might be, I gotta say the paint job on this figure, especially on the nightgown and her hair, are like sublime. The shading looks phenomenal. Like this shade of blue looks super good, and just like this luster that the nightgown, the lingerie, the negligee, whatever you call it, I'm not exactly sure. I'm impressed. I think her outfit looks really good. And it's not like this figure is any more expensive than the other bunny girls for the most part. She's 39,000 yen, which is very expensive, but a lot of these figures are that, or just like, a little bit more, a little bit less. So I feel like it's in line and it looks a bit prettier than some other figures. Maybe I like this one more than the cat figure. I'm not really sure. But it's still stupid. It's still absolutely stupid, but she's also gorgeous. So you kind of excuse her for that. I don't know, is there even like a problem with this figure? Like there's nothing objectively wrong with the sculpt. It's just kind of fun to nitpick the silliness of like the situation here. But yeah, I'm gonna give it a thumbs up and move on. I am so glad that Lemillion just doesn't have to be displayed with the wall, because I just found it really silly looking. Even if it's there to show off his abilities, it just doesn't really work right in a 3D space. So the fact that one, I could just not use it altogether, but two, just buy a separate version that doesn't come with the wall is a win all the way. He looks great, as most of these hero figures do, like little Lucas all grown up. I like this guy. The DX version does come with a bonus faceplate though, but I'm not actually sure if it's a faceplate or if it's something that you kind of just like use for memes, because it certainly does not fit the figure, nor do they ever show this figure with this faceplate, and they don't like talk about it in the description. So I legitimately think you just like place this on your wall, or on this figure's wall, or on your desk, and it kind of looks like he's appearing through it, which is kind of funny, but kind of feels like you're gonna lose this piece if you're not really careful. So I don't really know if I care about that, but it's fun, so like there's no harm in that. From Mega House, we had the Loki Persona 5 figure go up, which is just cool. It's cool that Mega House is making some of the actual Persona from the series, and going for Loki ended up producing one distinct-ass figure. He's essentially sitting on a throne of flames, and like the erratic nature of some of the flames looks really slick. Actually, I guess that's kind of like to fit along with Loki's design in general. Very angular in nature with all those psychedelic black and white stripes. It's a bit trippy to look at, and I really like that about it. They haven't made a ton of these. I know Arsene and Thanatos exist, but I'm probably forgetting one. But I really hope they continue to make these, because I really like this idea. Hey, you remember this one, the Nanachi Naa figure, because she's just enjoying the food so much that she has to audibly express it? Points for originality. It's kind of a funny figure, really. The food doesn't look good because it's in universe, and the base is a bit goofy because she's like so much bigger than that house. But Nanachi's sculpts and like the lushness of the terrain was pretty well handled here. The price isn't that bad either, but she is definitely on the smaller side, so that's probably why. Shinya Kogami's figure got a re-release, which should be great news considering the aftermarket prices, but this is one of the worst offenders of like inflated re-release prices, because this guy used to cost about 9,000, 9,200 yen, and now he costs all the way up to 25,000 yen. And I don't really know what else to say about that, because that is absolutely ridiculous. It's not a complex figure, and it's not like exceptionally well painted either. Like the figure looks solid, don't get me wrong, but that's like what, 16,000 yen more than it used to be? I don't know. That must have been like really upsetting if you were looking forward to this figure and then you found out the price tag was that much more than it used to be. Now, I don't have that like attachment to the figure that some people might, but I find it kind of offensive, and I think I would legitimately rather pay somebody on the aftermarket. Kind of a shitty situation. That's like the only way to look at this. Prisma Wing put up their Mikey figure this month, and gosh, if they just handled his face a little bit better, this could have been the Mikey to get. But currently, I'm just not really won over despite how well handled the base and his pose are. Incorporating the streets of Japan into his figure isn't like a galaxy brain move, but it's certainly an intelligent one, and I kind of love how like exaggerated his coat is like flowing off behind him. It just has a really cool look to it. The figure's got a nice presence to it, and the street and the cone look like properly weathered too. But yeah, the face on this guy is just kind of okay. Maybe rushed is like a better word to use. I think they could have spent like a little bit more time cleaning it up and presenting a better face for us. I would say keep an eye out on this one, maybe wait and see how he turns out, because the fact of the matter is that we have not seen a single Prisma Wing figure released just yet, and we really don't know like the level of their quality. We do know that the company is like run by Prime 1 Studios, but at the same time, they normally don't make PBC scale figures at this size, so who's to say they're gonna turn out good? But I think this one has promise if they tighten it up a little bit, but yeah, hard to just say like, oh, go get this right now if you're a big fan of Mikey. Saber Astolfo is one of the more expensive figures from Kotobukiya I've seen in quite a bit. He looks good, but 25,000 yen good, I'm not exactly sure. What I will say is that the pathing on like his Ivy sword, I don't actually know the name of it, I'm sorry, is great. Especially at angles like this, it just shows off the sword properly, while also adding some like flair to the sculpt. However, with my limited knowledge, every time I see this figure, I can't help but feel like the sword looks unpainted. I believe there's like a subtle application of like pearlescent white to it, but it's really hard to say for sure. It's obviously painted, don't get it twisted, but I just wish it stood out a little bit more to me. But anyway, Bunny Astolfo isn't a design I've seen much of actually now that I think about it, but you're getting like midriff and thigh high, so I'm sure that's enough for some people. But honestly, the color combination on this figure is pretty nice. The use of gold is balanced well, and I like the little bits of red found throughout the figure on like his costume. He comes with a bonus face, of course, which I have seen actually, but it's not in front of me physically right now, so I'll just put it on screen for you guys, and I actually kind of like it a bit more. But some people kind of feel weird about like winking faces on anime figures, so I guess feel free to disagree. I just think it makes the figure feel a bit more lively, which is always a positive to me. So yeah, it's a pretty good showing from Kotobukiya, gotta say. The other figure of theirs this month was the Transformers Bumblebee girl. I'll be the first to just admit, not really into this line specifically, but that doesn't mean I dislike them or that they're bad. 14,000 yen, or about 15,000 yen rather, is always going to be a great deal for a Kotobukiya figure. They are very reliable, and I like what they've done with this one. They gave her a hoodie, and she also has some like gyaru socks, those like oversized socks, except I'm not exactly sure if they're socks because there is a black layer underneath the gray layer, so whatever's happening, I'm not exactly sure, but it's reminiscent of that design, and I like it as a result. Mikamo Neru is another one of our controversial figures, and this one's going to take a little bit of time to talk about, so this might be the longest section in the video, but bear with me. Now, I've gone on record stating how impressed I was with this figure, and nothing has really changed in my mind regarding so. I still believe this is a standout bunny figure that has essentially set the bar for what I will now look for in bunny girl figures. From the extravagance of the base to the realistic creasing of the suit itself, the bomber jacket looks excellent on her, and that fierce, pissed off look on her face, I think it's all excellent. Price ain't even that bad on this figure, and you also get an additional faceplate, this being the first time that we're seeing it, and I actually kind of like it. I'm not sure if I like it more than the original faceplate, but I could totally see myself swapping between the two if I were to buy it. I'm unsure right now, but let's talk about the issue. So back at One Fest, we saw this figure on display, and it looked great, as I kind of just explained. Even if you don't agree with me, it doesn't really matter for the story. However, photographers are always trying to get the best photos, maybe get a scoop, give you a reason to click on their blog or their Twitter, and there was one brave soldier who took it upon themselves to get real close and personal with this figure, to the point where they could take like a top-down photo to essentially look down her bunny suit, because as you could see, it's not really like attached to her skin. And the findings were that this figure actually had some nipples sculpted on it. And that kind of like erupted a certain part of the community that was interested in this figure. Even I guess outsiders who didn't really care about it just took note of this, and it got a lot of people talking on Twitter and my figure collection and probably other places too. But this all got to a point where Spiritel had to step in and officially state that this would not be on the final product, which led to a lot of people being really pissed off to the point where they were like declaring that they would never buy another figure from them. They're swearing off this one and anything else they're making in the future. Now, there's only one real way I view this, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate this time around. The whole situation just feels like a mistake. Whoever sculpted this figure clearly put in some extra details that were never supposed to be on this figure. And as a result, Spiritel needed to say something to make sure that their consumers weren't going to buy this figure for that specific reason or details. Spiritel, to my knowledge, doesn't make any nude figures, and I'm guessing that's just not a path they want to take. Like, some people are calling this censorship, and I find that pretty silly and a bit forced just to kind of stir up trouble. I don't know, the whole situation's a bit overblown if you ask me. If you no longer think this figure has any value to it now that they've removed a nipple that was never promised to begin with, then I don't really know what to tell you. Someone will probably get mad at me for saying that, but it is what it is. On the more normal side of things, Spiritel also put up their Hatsune Miku 39 Special Day figure, pretty pricey at 35,000 yen, but there's quite a bit to this figure. She's got the throne, the robe that she's stepping on for some reason. I don't know why they designed her like that. All the flowers that are behind her, and of course, the more regal items that are placed in her hand and atop her head. I like how the gold is very sparingly used on this figure, only on the items that like signify signs of royalty, like the crown and the scepter. Otherwise, the color palette here is a bit more on the natural side, like slightly realistic, I suppose. I don't want to say muted, but it's not super vibrant. It's grounded, I suppose, but I kind of like it. It's an odd piece to me, though. Like, there's a lot to like about it, but it also doesn't really have that wow factor for me. All the individual components are crafted really well, but nothing really grabs my attention like I would assume it should. But it's also unique, and unlike any other Miku figure I've seen, this might be a figure I appreciate more over time, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see in the future. Guitar Sisters Mei Mei, what do I want to say about this one? You know, I like it. At first glance, kind of made me want to eye roll a little bit, but that's a really narrow way of thinking about things, considering that it's a great design, and I think if I saw the original illustration, I would like this figure a lot more. I just don't really have that visual in my head at the moment. For some reason, though, this just looks like a higher quality than most Union Creative figures, and I believe it has to do with the way this figure was painted. It's a bit darker than I would have imagined, but at the same time, there's like excellent shading on this prototype, like all throughout this figure. What an outfit though. Like even the way she's wearing it is kind of unique. Like the jacket is slouched over on the opposite side of where the backless dress begins. And the sweater, if I can get back to the front of it, is kind of curling up a little bit at the stomach. And I like her Converse shoes. So I think it's a good design overall. You know, maybe it's the sheen. There's like a soft glow or shine to this piece that just highlights multiple areas of her body and outfit that just gives it a high quality look. Funny enough, I think the guitar is the most disappointing part of this figure. Like, it's not bad, but it's sort of just there for me. Here's hoping Union Creative can deliver on this one, because it would be such a shame if they wasted this design. Some other figures that went up this month that you may be interested in were Belfine's Nia Honjo. Really like the use of translucent plastic here to simulate liquid. Ryu Leon from Is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon by Alice Glint. I know I said her name wrong last time, and hey, maybe I said it wrong this time too, but she is now available to pre-order. I'm not sure if her face mask was shown off previously, but I definitely dig it. Hobbystock put up a sexy Nurse Yozakura 1/4 scale figure for only 26,000 yen. Can't really speak on the quality. I think the prototype looks fine so far, but the price tag should be enough reason that if like you're interested in this, you might want to look into other figures they put up, maybe. Cat Eye Girl illustration by Lemoe Figure really needed an option to allow us to display her without the little handkerchief. I assume she's wiping blood from her mouth considering like all the blood pouches attached to her, but like it just kind of blocks her face, and this being the only way to display her currently kinda stinks. The color palette on this figure is also just a bit too dark for my liking. The details are all blending into each other a bit too much, with the only exceptions really being the skull cane, which is sick, and the back of her hair, which is seemingly brighter than the front for whatever reason. I also like the ripped leggings, and I think the design is overall very strong and cute, but it's just held back by some like minor details that could be fixed in the final product. Nino from the Quintuplets got her floral dress figure by Eastream. Now, last time I expressed my approval of the Yotsuba figure, but I think Nino might be giving her a run for her money. There is a lack of a pattern on her dress like Yotsuba had, instead going for glitter, but the various shades of purple is just sublime. And the bouquet is probably the best one so far. The mix of flowers and colors are really eye-catching this time around. This is a bit of an overlooked detail, but her pose also just allows us to view the flowers attached to the fence better, which gives this figure a wider scope of colors to just appreciate. I'm sure the other figures have it, but I can actually enjoy the flowers on this figure due to the positioning of her legs. Like, yeah, this figure is really cute and very colorful. I like it a lot. Next up is Clumsy Maid Lily by Vibrastar. Once again, really cute figure. There's something about her teary-eyed face. It's doing a proper job in making me feel kind of bad for her, which just makes it a little bit more endearing. But yeah, anyway, if you haven't pieced it together, she like dropped a plate and she's crying about it and she's trying to pick up the pieces. The original illustration actually had her knee cut up a little bit and was bleeding, but as you can see, while there is a rip in her stocking, there isn't any blood, which is honestly fine. Like, I don't really feel like that's a necessary detail of the figure, but I just wanted to point that out in case you were expecting it if you were following this piece. Everything else though seems very faithful. The emotions are on point. The chest has this like very supple look to it. The thighs are like not so subtly being pinched to emphasize the thickness. And of course on top of all that there is the whole nudity aspect of this figure, which you'll unfortunately have to look up yourself if you're interested. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not really seeing any cut corners here. The paint job looks very quality, and even the base is this like nice marble looking dish. Looking at this figure is making me kind of regret not picking up that elf girl I talked about a couple months back, because I feel like they're really on a roll here, but I just don't really collect those kind of figures. Like, as much as I like looking at them, I don't ever feel like I need them with limited amounts of money to spend on figures, so I don't really know. However, this absolutely gets my recommendation. I'm kind of surprised that this Destiny Child War Goddess Acrasia is not a cast-off, as the design really feels like it should be, but it's still rather like provocative in nature, right? It's a little too muted color-wise for my personal taste, but the outfit's design is definitely a fun one, though I guess that would only be the case if you're down with the whole like dominatrix angle of this figure. Honestly, I think the handcuffs are a bit silly with them floating around her and whatnot, but I like the whip and her sadistic face. It's oddly cute when I assume they wanted to look more mature and sexy, but I personally find that there's like a slight juxtaposition between her facial features and her voluminous body. That's not to say cute characters can't be curvy, but in this specific instance, the art style is just speaking to me differently. Might also be the big cop hat that you can actually take off too. Like, yeah, I don't know. There's just something that's hard to explain about this one. It's like a feeling that I just can't actually express. But yeah, the chest is ample, the thighs are thick, the hair is parting in the back. If I can find a photo of it that just kind of like shows off her butt, it allows you to view that from the back. And the gold, white, black, and like light lavender is an excellent color pairing. 23,000 yen for a 1/6 scale is also not bad either. So overall, I'd say this is a pretty good showing from the company. Here we have Girls Frontline PA-15 Phantom Thief of Champagne by Apex. It's pretty bold, maybe even audacious. What a dress she is wearing, goddamn. I'm loving how glossy the dress looks too. It just kind of like gives the impression of being wrapped rather tightly around her. The whole figure is pretty sexy, right? Like, they definitely know what they're doing here. She's pulling on the straps, the heels are coming off and kind of just like balancing on her toes. Her head is tilting back a bit. If I can get a better view of her face, there's just something about the way she's staring at you too. It's all so alluring, right? The set dressing is also a plus, especially for the price. Like, the table's got this similar level of glossy finish to it, and the table's filled with champagne bottles and balloons, which I believe are to celebrate the game's anniversary. If we take a look at her hair, it's tied up in a ribbon, which is just fitting for the whole celebratory nature of this figure, but it also just looks phenomenal in the actual sculpt, and the paint looks really nice too. So yeah, there's really not that much else to say besides Apex is continuing to deliver really nice looking figures for really reasonable prices. If Apex is known for their good prices, then Furyu is likely known for the opposite. So let's take a minute and talk about this company, as they've released a lot of figures this month, and some of them are pretty outrageous. Now, this is not one of the outrageous figures. I think it's fine. Maybe it's a little overpriced, but these Blue Lock figures of Nagi as well as Bachira are really not that bad. I don't think they're that impressive, but I don't really see any other companies making like 1/7 scales of these characters just yet. So at least they're filling in a niche, which really is the best thing this company does. They seem to tackle IPs and characters that other bigger companies just aren't going to do. So I do give them credit for that. But as we're going to see, things are going to get worse. Next up, we have this Overlord Albedo Season 4 Soben version, which is really expensive at 37,000 yen. And I don't even really like it, and I don't feel bad saying that because there are so many Albedos on the market, and I can just point you to like any other one. I'm just not really sure what's going on with this dress. I also don't like how like literally spherical her chest is. It just looks a little bit too unnatural. Like, I'm not expecting the most realistic looking chest on an anime figure of all things, but I don't know, they're a little bit too spherical for my liking. I just can't really get that out of my mind. I also don't really like this color on her. I do like that her hair matches the dress if I could find like a picture of it, but again, they do this like translucent thing, which never really looks that good in the end, especially when they like kind of overdo it. I just wish they would maybe go back to a more traditional style of plastic for, you know, gradients and whatnot. But I don't know, it's not the worst figure they've ever made, but it's really expensive for what it is, and I think even this company has made like 10 more Albedos that frankly look a little bit better than this. Now next up is a rather interesting Rimuru figure, the party dress version, and if I had to choose one of their figures this month to put above the rest, it would probably be this one. This is like the only one that I feel like is kind of fresh and interesting. There's also just something about the color scheme that I really like. I don't know what it is about orange and blue, but it just really works for me. It's very reminiscent of the Orange Blossom Miku that I have behind me in one of my Detolf cases. I don't have a lot of Miku figures, but I really like that figure, and this just reminds me of her. So yeah, it's kind of a fun outfit, I'm not gonna lie. I love how big the ribbon is. It's sculpted really well, and I like the, I don't know, kind of clear plastic they've used here. It just looks really nice as like an accessory to the back of the dress. I don't really love the pattern on the dress itself. I feel like that could look a little bit nicer. It feels a little bit cheap in comparison to everything else, but then there's just elements like the fact that the bloomers are always showing on Rimuru. That's so weird on a dress, but I guess he gets away with it because why not? Orange gloves too, all the pearls, and I definitely like the boots. They're very cute, color's great, roses on them are great. Like, I don't know, it's just a fun figure. I can't help but give them some credit. I like it. It's a little expensive, 33,000 yen. Absolutely not buying it. However, I wouldn't blame you if you wanted it, because I think it's pretty standout. And then there's figures like this where I don't really feel qualified to talk about them because I'm never gonna buy one, and I don't really understand the significance of it. I don't understand how it could possibly cost this much money, so it's best for me to just not make myself sound like a fool and move on, but at least I'm acknowledging that this is being made in case this is something that's up your alley, the Hatsune Miku Japanese doll 1/4 scale. But to get to the final point of this section, I just want to highlight a couple of figures that are so overpriced that I feel like we really need to talk about it. Now, there's two specific examples, but they're kind of the same thing in terms of like what I'm going to cover, so I don't really need to talk about this Rem and Ram figure because I don't really want to. It's a bit weird anyway, but I do want to talk about the Power and Makima figure, the one in the nurse outfits for 54,000 yen. This figure is only like okay. In my opinion, I do not think the price tag comes anywhere close to the actual quality that you're going to be getting with this figure. If I had to price this, I'd probably put it at like 30,000 yen, which is still a lot of money. You gotta understand that there are still two characters here, so it has to cost a certain amount of money to make sense. However, there's just no detail on this figure at all. In fact, I don't even really think that these two look like their manga counterparts or even the anime counterparts. I know exactly what this specific figure is based on, the specific art piece, and this does not look like it enough to really feel like you're getting your money's worth. For 54,000 yen, you can get much nicer pieces. However, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter. Like, Furyu, it says Mappa here, but it's absolutely Furyu. This company can do whatever it wants. It's not in danger of going out of business, of becoming bankrupt, because they have so many other revenues to get money that they can just do whatever the hell they want. And people are going to buy this. And you can buy this too. If you like it, I don't really care. But the problem is you set a precedent. If you buy things that are very expensive, you're telling the companies that you're okay with it. But in this specific case, they can just do whatever they please because even if they only make a couple of sales, they're still making money, right? These are made to order. They're not really gonna have to worry about too much if they only make a couple of hundred. Then the figure technically becomes rare, and then it's sought after. Like, I'm not even really surprised that I just don't find this figure very appealing at all. I don't think Furyu is a great company. I think they are pretty average at best. And even when it comes to like nurse figures, you can make the excuse that there's not that much going on in a nurse costume. However, I have seen much nicer nurse figures for much less money. One of the few regrets I have in terms of like not picking up a figure and then having it like kind of jump up on the aftermarket to the point where I don't really want to pay those prices was the Yami figure where she's in a nurse costume from To Love Through Darkness. This is a figure made by Alter a couple years back. It's not their best work, but it's definitely of a high quality. The paint on the outfit is very clean and it has a nice luster to it. Her hair has some good shading and is very vibrant. Her face looks amazing. It is pretty perfect, which is an issue I have with the Power and Makima figure. I don't feel like they've really done justice to the art style of Chainsaw Man. And even though this is like an unfair comparison because you're not supposed to have like accessories and things to go along with the base on that Chainsaw Man figure, don't you just like the fact that she's kind of like straddling the giant syringe, and then you can see her thigh pressing against the syringe? That looks so good. Feels like you're paying for something pretty high quality, and I believe this was only about 20,000 yen. Now, of course, this is a price tag from a couple years back and things have gotten worse, but it just goes to show you that, like, you don't need the new thing. Go buy an old thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. It still looks very good if you want to go out and buy it, but I don't know. I just kind of went on a little tangent because I like this figure a lot, and I really don't like this figure. The colors are very dull. The art style, not really there for me. It's just trying to prey on like a really specific audience of Chainsaw Man fans that are also really horny and are willing to spend over like 50,000 yen for a single figure with the most basic of all bases. Like, I don't know, man. Like, there's just nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here to talk about. But yeah, that's a little bit of a rant. I wish Furyu would stop abusing the fact that they could just price things however they want. I don't really like this company, so let's move on to something that I definitely do like. Alright, so I didn't want to end on a sour note, so we have two really good figures to talk about. Technically three. No, definitely three, but we'll get there when we get there. But this is the return of Alter this year with their Sakura Mato Makiri's Grail figure. Yeah, Alter just didn't put out like any figures until the end of March, and I was definitely missing their presence, but they're back and they're making sure you remember them by putting out what I believe will be the definitive Sakura figure. Honestly, the Aniplex figure isn't bad at all. In fact, it's quite good, but it's hard to look at this one by Alter and just not fall in love with it instantly. I'll do my best to describe it because despite seeing and really enjoying Heaven's Feel, I just don't exactly know how to describe the shadowy stripes that are just kind of like running throughout her body to give her like a somewhat dress-like outfit. But many of them have just like gone off on their own. They're like sporadically squiggling and squirming in their own directions. There's like a glossy finish applied to all the dark red portions of the shadows too. It's all a bit unsettling really, but it's a really cool looking design. There's even a little familiar fella on the bottom of this base if you look pretty closely down here, but there's only one of them apparently. Back to Sakura though, her body is just covered in this like red pattern, which is just naturally bringing your eyes to stare at her legs. It's all rather enchanting. She's got a bit of like a sinister expression, which couldn't be more than perfect. And I love the little light effect that's coming out of her hand, as if it's the literal frame right before her next attack is unleashed. It's dynamic, it's beautifully painted, it's attractive, and it highlights the series expertly. Unless they messed this up, I think they might have crafted the perfect Fate figure. I'm really excited to see how this one turns out. And last up, we got a surprise reveal from Mythos, the Rei Ayanami and Asuka Langley Shikinami Whisper of Flower version. You can buy these separately if you'd like for about 25,000 yen each, which yes, is the inflated price tag that we all have to deal with these days, but we've ranted about that long enough, so let's just focus on the figures. Ami's photos are kind of bad for this gallery, so I'm just going to use like this main one from MFC to kind of just talk about the figure for the remainder of this video. But anyway, it's hard to deny how gorgeous both of these figures are, though I personally find one of them to be a bit more appealing than the other. I mean, that always happens in waifu wars, but in this case, I particularly find Asuka's figure to have the nicer composition and colors. I'm just more sold on this prettier doll-like interpretation of her thanks to the warmer colors and cuter design of the outfit. Rei's eyes are a bit more sharp and striking, which I like quite a bit, but I'm not the biggest fan of her dress. I just feel like it's a bit too messy up here, and I can't really discern what is what. Like, I don't really know exactly what the pattern or like the material is supposed to be. Are these ribbons? Are they flowers? Like, these might be flowers, but this back here definitely isn't. So I don't know, I just don't really like it. It's just a bit too dark for me to really pick apart the dress itself. But it's pretty obvious that there is a clear strength in owning both of them, considering how like naturally they contrast with each other. They kind of always do with their figures, but it's definitely more thought out here because of like the flowers and the positioning of the girls. But yeah, this figure just has like really nice framing when you pair them up, and as a result, they just look lovely. So, like, it's a little expensive. I wish we had the older prices these days, but I said I wouldn't talk about that, so I won't. But I do appreciate them actually tackling a series that I'm familiar with for once. It feels like they rarely do that, so this is kind of fun to see. But anyway, that's going to do it for our pre-order roundup for March. Hopefully you guys found it enjoyable. Hopefully you guys found some figures you might be picking up in the future. I'm not exactly sure if I plan to pick up any of the figures in this video. There's a lot of nice stuff, don't get me wrong, but I just gotta really choose my battles here and make sure I'm not like overspending these days. But anyway, appreciate you guys checking this one out. I'll be back pretty soon with another video. I kinda delayed my unboxing for specific reasons, which I'll talk about in the near future, maybe in that video. I'm not really sure yet, but I appreciate your patience. I'm not doing it on purpose. There's reasons for it. But anyway, if you want to support the channel, like the video, leave me a comment, subscribe of course, and use one of my affiliate links if you feel like buying something for yourself or a friend. Either way, I'll see you very soon, and until next time, take care. Later.